Hello and welcome to episode 99 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I am delighted to be joined this morning by Jess. Welcome, Jess.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on. We are going to talk through your unique, it's probably the right word to put it,
Yeah, definitely.
Hirschsprung story. I know everybody's is unique to a certain extent, but there's certainly more going on in some stories than others. So we're going to chat through your story, all about Hirschsprungs and various other bits and pieces, shall we put them,
Yeah.
that have happened in your life as well. Um, but I guess it's up to you really where you'd like to start from.
Well, I guess we can start right from the very beginning.
Cool.
So, I was born at the end of 2005, and I experienced from birth through being a couple of weeks old, um, I wasn't feeding properly, and I would get constantly constipated. My mum didn't know what to do with herself. And she was like, "Oh, maybe it's an intolerance." So we had an intolerance check done and it came back all clear. So she was super concerned, like, I don't know what's going on then if she's not got an intolerance. Um, so we had a few like doctor's visits as you would, but I was getting constantly distended. So I had like a proper little pot belly, even though I'm like tiny little baby, and even when I was a young kid as well, I had one. So they were really confused as to what it was because they were like, "Well, she's not got any allergies or anything." So, okay, we'll just keep monitoring her. So this carried on for like a year. And then on my first birthday in 2007, no, on my first birthday, not 2007, 2006, we spent 2.5 weeks where I was on the sofa. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep properly, and I couldn't move properly. So I was basically bedbound. And I remember my mum telling me that my first birthday was spent just on the sofa watching Disney films because I just couldn't participate in any activities whatsoever, which she was so upset about because obviously your child's first birthday, you want it to be happy and full of memories, and there wasn't any happiness about it. So she found that quite difficult. I didn't have a clue what was going on, so I didn't think much of it. Um, but yeah, I wasn't eating for 2.5 weeks, and then 2007 came. We checked for intolerances again, none again. And then we did some blood tests, and they all came back completely clear. So then they started me on the dreaded Movicol, which never went well. And there wasn't much of a change. So they were getting like really concerned, and then the Picolax came in. So I was dosed up on that every day. And then towards the end of '07, I had my first biopsy and first anal stretch. So bear in mind the fact that I'm not even two by this point, and I'm already having that done. It was quite overwhelming on my family. And I didn't have a lot of family nearby because my grandparents were all over the place because my granddad was in the army. So they were in Germany or Scotland or Somerset, Blandford, or in another country. So it was basically my mum and my dad and my aunt who were primarily around to help with all of that. But my mum was a full-time teacher, so even then she would try and get as much time off as she could, but there's only so much you can get off with that kind of career. But she did everything she could. Um, And then in '08, we got my biopsy results back and they came back inconclusive. Yeah, I know.
That's never what you want.
No, I know. And then because of that, they were like, okay, we're gonna up your Movicol. So I was on 4 sachets a day. I know. I'm 3 at this point as well. And I had no idea what it was. I do remember when I was like 4 years old, my mum took me to the dentist and I had a little Movicol sachet and I'd only drink it in a milkshake. I wouldn't drink it with anything else. So that's all I remember from that, but it tasted horrible.
Yeah,
So after that and there was no change, I then had my second anal stretch and biopsy. Um at this point I'm 3. The biopsy results came back inconclusive once again. I know. So, then they decided that they were going to give me an enema every day. So that was fun.
yeah.
Um, and that had no effect whatsoever. Nothing was working, nothing was passing. And at that point, the blockages started to happen. So nothing was happening, and because of that, I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking properly, which obviously you need to drink a lot with Hirschsprungs because you get twice as dehydrated as the average person.
I
So
didn't know that. I didn't
yeah,
know that. I knew we were more dehydrated than most, but I didn't realize it was that much.
no, you get dehydrated twice as much as the average person. So fun fact.
Hmm.
Um,
Or
so
not so fun, as it
yeah,
turns
not
out.
so fun for us. So after the blockages started up again, Picklax was then introduced. So that was fun. And then they were really concerned because they were like, we don't know what to do. So then they referred me to irid iridology, which is like herbal medicine, which didn't do much. And then I also saw kinesiology. So we did that and nothing really came out of it. And my health just started to deteriorate even more. And my surgeon decided that he was going to do a lateral sphincterotomy. So we had that done. Um, they removed all of my medication. So I wasn't on Picolax or Movicol anymore or the enema. We were just freewheeling at this point. Um, and we had a lot of bloods taken, which I hated. That was not my thing in a hospital. And there was detected cell abnormalities from the surgery. So because of this, they requested a second opinion. And in my notes, I couldn't read it properly, but I think it says Guy's Hospital, or maybe,
That would, yeah, that would make sense
yeah.
potentially. Yeah,
So we had a second opinion from them. They didn't really give much of a response. They didn't really take part in this at all. So we moved on from that, and I ended up being admitted for observation from my surgeon. And I stayed there for a little while, and they just monitored how I was, realized that I started to get really distended really quickly, and because of my type of Hirschsprungs, I can't pass anything myself.
right.
So it was a proper struggle because I couldn't help myself at all, and no one knew what was going on. Um, so after that, my mum decided that she wanted to take some action, and she wanted to send off my biopsies and the cell abnormalities to Great Ormond Street for a second opinion. They reduced my meds again during this process, so which didn't help. And then Great Ormond suggested that there was traces of Hirschsprung's disease.
So how old are you at this point then?
I'm
Three?
3 years old, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
nearly 4 at this point.
and and you haven't been diagnosed necessarily with Hirschsprung's still at this point.
No, this was just a second
Wow.
opinion. So then my doctors had to go away and take all my biopsies, test it again, and everything. And during that time, my surgeon suggested a Duhamel pull through. So I had that done just before my 4th birthday. And in my surgeon's 21 years of working, he had never had a perforation and leakage. And I was the first one that he'd had. And it happened 3 days after my surgery. So then we had to have a we had to close with a colostomy. So I had a colostomy before my 4th birthday, um, which was fun. So my mum had to deal with that. And then after all the biopsies that they had done at Southampton, it was finally diagnosed that I had Hirschsprung's disease. So, woohoo, we finally got there. Finally, I got a diagnosis. Um, and then it wasn't even that long, it was a couple of months or about a year after I had my colostomy, they decided to reverse it again. So we had that reversed and we went back to the Movicol and the Picolax and the at-home rectal irrigation. So we did all of that and it wasn't working because the problem with me was that my Hirschsprung's was obviously in the colon as normal, but also in the anal sphincter. So because of that, I couldn't pass water, let alone anything else. So the at-home irrigation systems, they didn't work because it would get trapped inside my body. So, and that would lead to a lot of immunity issues because I couldn't prevent myself from all the bacteria building up. So I was constantly in pain. I remember starting school and I had to carry like a little Wheatie bag around with me because the pain was just immense. And I'd have to, in my break times, I'd have to go and take my medication and then I'd go and play for a little bit and then I'd go back into class. And that was just the cycle for years. Um, and I would constantly have like random leakages. So where we'd done the irrigation, I would randomly have spurts where it would be able to come out, but in small doses. So my mum was telling me about how when I was younger, I wanted to be able to wear normal underwear and trousers like other people. Um, but I couldn't because I was having up to 6 accidents a day where the irrigation was finally doing something, but it wasn't passing everything. So that was quite fun. And then luckily, my school were amazing and they actually made a functioning disabled toilet with a shower for me. So we got some funding for that. And then when I was in year 4, so I was 9, they decided that that was enough and the irrigation's not working. Okay, we're gonna have a stoma bag put in. So then Stoma Steve was born. That is his name, and it has stuck for 10 years. So, yeah, he came into life, which was it was life-changing, honestly. I don't think I would have been able to have survived the way that I had done if it had continued. Um, and also the developmental issues that it would have caused. So glad we got that. And then in the same year, so it was the summer that I was just about to get my bag, um, I was talking to Karen Dix,
Hmm.
and she was talking about the fundraising that she's doing for the Hirschsprung's Family Connections. And every year my school would do a fundraising event. So each year group would pitch what charity they wanted to do. You know, everyone comes up with like cancer research and Salvation Army and everything. And I'm 9, and I decide to put forward Hirschsprung's Family Connections. I pitch it, I do an assembly about it, and it's the chosen charity of the year. I can't remember how much we raised, to be honest with you, but we did an event day where you could throw wet sponges at the teachers, and there was races and everything, and we raised enough money to be able to give to Hirschsprung's Family Connections. And I cannot remember for the life of me what museum it was, but in this museum they have a whole section about the bowel. So Karen ended up taking me and a group of other children with Hirschsprung's and Crohn's to this museum, and we learnt about how the digestive system is meant to work and how our system works. So the difference between it. And you got to like see all these models and walk in through this like intestine cove and learn all about it. And then Karen was like, this is where your Hirschsprung is and everything. So I don't know how much the kids took on board at that point. I don't remember a lot, and I was 9, and a lot of the kids that were there were like 5. So, um, but yeah, I do remember going there, and I do remember that was really insightful to learn about and actually image, because I think the problem with being a child with Hirschsprung's is that you don't actually understand what's going on. You just know that something's wrong, and you're not fully aware of everything. So to be able to visually put that into perspective was a good learning situation for young people. And I feel like that would be really good like nowadays as well. So raising money for the same charity to be able to redo that same intervention that we did would be really helpful for letting kids learn about what's going on inside their body. Um, so then after that, I got my stoma back, and it was all working pretty well, to be honest. It was going really well. And then about a year later, when I was 10, I had my first blockage. And I went to Poole Hospital for it, and it was the worst experience. I remember it, and I remember my mum having to tell one of the doctors how to put in a cannula because they couldn't do it, and how to take my blood pressure because they were trying to do it down here. So my mum had to teach this nurse how to take my blood pressure and put in a cannula because she couldn't do it. And same with another doctor. And we kept on telling her it's a blockage. And they were like, no, it's not. And my mum was trying to push for it and was like, no, but it is. Nothing's coming out of the stoma. If it is, then it's all liquid and it's just something's wrong. She's getting really distended, which we haven't had at all since we've had the bag. So Paul did all their tests and everything, and they were like, yeah, oh yeah, it is actually a blockage. We're gonna send you to Southampton to do that. So then we got moved from Poole all the way to Southampton just so that they could clear my blockage. And unfortunately, the only way that I can have a clear or a washout is if I'm under anesthesia. Because if I'm awake, the muscles won't work properly and I can't actually physically pass it. So they have to put me out to suction everything. And that's the only way that we've ever been able to do it. So I had that done and everything was going pretty smoothly. Um, then I had my stoma nurse in Bournemouth, Emma. She was amazing. I'd see her every year just to check up. Um, Occasionally my stoma would like get a small blockage. It wasn't major, or I'd get the rashes and everything around it, which we were told was normal, but that was nothing compared to what I'd experienced as a child with the blockages and the pain and the distension of the stomach. So we just took that with a pinch of salt. And then in 2020, I had my big trauma. So it was late, I'd been experiencing pain and discomfort, and I was like, I think it's blockage again. And I was like, do you know what? I'm just gonna wait and see. So I held on, and then I just remember this night so vividly. I woke up in immense pain, flipped open my bed sheets, and there was blood everywhere, all over the bed, and it was all down my legs. And I was crawling from my room to my mum because I was shouting and no one could hear me because I'm on the other side of the house. And it was pitch black, dark, no one was there. So I had to crawl on my hands and knees to my mum's room because I couldn't walk. And I was like, Mum, something's really wrong. I'm bleeding and I'm in such pain. So we had to go to Southampton in an emergency, and I was screaming the whole way there. When we got into the A&E, the person was trying to wave us off. She was like, "Yeah, just go and sit down." So while my mum was talking, I was sat down on this chair, and then when the woman was like, "No, just go and sit down, someone will call you in a minute," I screamed because I had only been sat there for 2 minutes and I had already covered the whole chair in blood. And the woman at reception looked over from me and was like, "Oh my God, she needs to go through right now." So they called someone to bring me through, and I was screaming so much. I remember this one nurse going, "Oh my God, the amount of pain she's in. I thought she was in labor or something." The screams. So they had to check. I had to wear one of those like adult nappies because I was bleeding through everything. Within 5 minutes, everything was covered. Um, so then they had to test me to be able to see because I'd lost so much blood if I needed more. Um, and then they did some tests and they were like, "You've got a severe case of diversion colitis. And if we don't do something about it, then in 20 minutes, you're going to go into septic shock." So we did a bunch of tests and everything and procedures. And then the next day, I had my big blockage removal. Um, and when I came out, they were like, "Oh, we're lucky that we caught this because if you hadn't come in when you did, you might have not made it through the night." So that terrified me. And we stayed in the hospital for a little while just so they could observe me and check that everything was going as planned afterwards. Um, Stoma finally started working again, which was good. And we it was severely traumatic, and I ended up with complex PTSD because of it. And I had to do for about 6 months EMDR light therapy to help. It changed my perspective on the opinion because to begin with the whole PTSD thing, you think, "Oh my God, that was a near-death experience. I feel like so much is going on inside my head and I don't know how to process it," and then you get overwhelmed. But instead that made me think that what I did was the right thing. Yes, it would have been catastrophic if I didn't, but because I did, and because the doctors saw in how bad of a state I was in, that I did survive it and I was in the right hands, and that this won't happen again and it'll all be fine. And then a 2 years later, I had a less severe blockage. So the same thing again. I wasn't bleeding this time properly. Um, the reason I was bleeding was because my blockage had perforated my bowel. So thankfully this time we didn't have that, but I still had to go in and have a washout under anesthesia. Um, since I had my stoma bag, we'd basically been doing that anyway, like every 2 years, just because I'd start to get the symptoms back. And then they're like, right, okay, we need to prevent this. So then we do a washout. And that's just kind of been a routine procedure. But 2020 was just, we missed that year. And that's when it led to being completely catastrophic. So we've learned from that, that we don't leave it long enough, that we have to do something about it. So um yeah, we have learnt from that. And then since then I have um I've had my autism diagnosis, which I don't know if a lot of people know that autism is actually quite common in people with bowel disorders, because of the developmental issues that you have. So that was really refreshing. And to be fair, my doctor was like, because I saw my nurse Karen and I told her about it, and she was like, I'm not surprised. I had my hunch for a little while, um, just because of how I reacted to doing things. Like, I remember when I was young and we had to do a manual washout and I wasn't under anesthesia. I was like, it was me, my mum, and two doctors locked in a big disabled toilet, and I was like screaming and having a fit, and they um were trying to do this washout, and she was like, from that moment on, I just knew that you were, because of the way that you handle things and the way that you process this kind of stuff. So that was refreshing to finally understand. And then this August, I started to have symptoms of a blockage. I went into Bournemouth Hospital and I was like, I'm having symptoms of a blockage. I've had this many times before. They were like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. They were like, yeah, but you're not being sick and your stoma is still working. And I'm like, yes, but I've never had those symptoms except the time in 2020 when my bag did stop working. But whenever I've had a blockage, that's never been my symptoms. And they were like, I just don't understand because everyone has those symptoms. And I was like, yes, but I don't, but I'm telling you that I do have one. So they didn't believe me and they sent me home. So I went back the next day to speak to my stoma nurse. And she was like, if you think that something's wrong, because your stoma's working, but I know your file, and if you're in pain and it's the same pain that you feel whenever you have a blockage, go to Southampton. So I called up Karen and I was like, I'm coming in. She was like, okay, brilliant. Okay, again. So we went in again, and this was my first time in adults because I've always been in peds having this done. And my first doctor was like, yeah, okay, we're going to do like a rectal exam and everything, and then we're going to do an x-ray. And then my second doctor came in for the night shift and she was like, we're not going to do any of that and I'm going to send you home. And I was like, but I'm still in pain. She was like, yeah, I know, but I'll send you home and we'll book for you to have a surgery done. So I was like, right, okay, whatever. And then I had to take a lot of time off work for the stress because I was like, oh my God, no one's doing anything. It's going to build up and I'm going to have the same as what I had in 2020. So I was really stressed out. I wasn't working because I was just an emotional wreck. And the pain as well. I couldn't stand up. My partner, bless him, he was cooking for me every night, making my lunches for the next day because he had to work. Um, Making sure I had everything I needed for the day to be on my own. Um, and I've just had to deal with it since. Still in pain, just waiting for my surgery. And then I thought it was tomorrow. Nope, we're having an appointment and then we're gonna book it probably for either the end of this year or beginning of next year. So I've just gotta suck it up until then, unfortunately. Um, I feel like Hirschsprung's disease is so overlooked, and because it's so rare, people aren't educated on it enough. Like my doctors, when I went in this year into adults, they were like, "What on earth is Hirschsprung's disease?" And I was like, "This is what I mean. Even medical professionals don't understand what it is because it's so rare." And the reason why I wasn't diagnosed so late on was also because I'm female. Because Hirschsprung's disease is most commonly known in males as opposed to women. So they were like, it can't be because she's a girl. But I did. I sprung through and I actually got my Hirschsprungs from my dad because it's a hereditary condition. And he also had a sphincterotomy and a pull through. But he had a colostomy bag for a little while, but he wasn't anywhere near as severe as my condition. But all of my doctors throughout my life have been like, I just don't understand because normally you do the pull through and you link everything back up and it's not fixed, it's not cured, but it works a bit better. Whereas for me, it was never going to work and they've suggested reversing my stoma and I've just gone no because we've done the tests. We know that my body doesn't work like that and I can't pass anything by myself. So I don't, they just want to test it. And I'm like, I don't feel comfortable testing it because we know and we've done the tests that we know it won't work. So what is the point in going through all the pain and the torture of having it reversed and having to go through everything and doing the washouts manually every day and everything for no results. So I put my foot down and I was like, I am keeping my stoma because without it, I I wouldn't be able to do the daily things that I do. I mean, it's been a blessing. When I was 12 all the way until I was 16, because I had my stoma, I played rugby and I was captain of my rugby team as well. I took them to county and we played all throughout Dorset and Wiltshire. Um, but if I hadn't had my stoma bag, I wouldn't have been able to have done that because I'd had years of my childhood ripped away where I was sat on the couch watching countless amount of times Finding Nemo to the point where my mum had to hide the DVD from me because she was so sick of watching it. And I couldn't do normal kid activities. I couldn't go out to play or go and ride my bike. I was just stuck inside. And I was like, what is the point in doing that again as an adult when I don't have the caring support of like my mum with me every day because I'm I'm proud of what I've been able to do because I'm 19 and I live with my partner in our own flat and we've got three cats. I'm a crazy cat lady. Um, but if I didn't have my stoma, I would still have to live with my mum for that support. And I just don't want to have the privileges of my own privacy and my own life stripped away from me just because the doctors want to see if my Hirschsprung's has gotten better and if everything will finally work, because that's not how it works, unfortunately. So,
That's
yeah.
wow. That's a heck of a story. That really is. It's interesting you say there when everybody has a different Hirschsprung story, and obviously I've heard, a lot over the last couple of years. Nothing like that, but obviously a lot in the last couple of years. But everybody is different. There are some that have said, "Oh, I'm not sure if I want to come on the podcast because I kind of had my pull through whatever it is, X amount of months or weeks or whatever, and now I'm all right. I haven't had any operation since." And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where you've got, tons of operations and various other things and procedures and this and that. And it is so vast in terms of its, one end to the other. There's a couple of things, there's quite a few things said on there that there's two things that really brought me back to my childhood. Movicol and Picolax. I've not heard those for about 25 years.
Literally,
Um,
that was my childhood.
it's so odd hearing those again because as soon as I couldn't have told you what medication I had, but as soon as you said it, I thought, yeah, I remember that. I remember that exactly. Um, but yeah, I mean, with especially with the diversion colitis of the first bout in 2020, sounds absolutely horrific, and I'm so glad that everything kind of, I don't want to say worked out, but you know what I mean, sort of, But with 2020 being the year it was and COVID as well, I guess that made it, I mean, doubly, triply more difficult.
Yeah, because this was right at the very end. It was, I think, uh, 5 days after my 16th birth. No, not 16th. 5 days after my 15th birthday. So this was the 19th of December. Wait, yeah, no. Okay, no, it's 6 days after my birthday, sorry. 19th of December 2020. And after the hellish year of not being able to go to school or anything, and 2020 was rough anyway because my mum was a primary worker because she was a school teacher. So she had to go into work to teach online, but also the kids who were kids of nurses or police officers or firefighters or other teachers. She had to go in and be with them. And because of that, I was on my own for most of 2020 to no fault to her. She had to do her thing during COVID, and I'm extremely proud of her for it. But yeah, I was alone for most of 2020, and then that happened, and it was just a whirlwind. And because of everything that was going on and my health as well, because you're in that awkward tween stage where you're 15 and you're like, oh, why does my body not look the same as everyone else's? Oh, I've got stoma bag, but I want to be able to wear, I don't know, low-rise jeans or whatever. And it's those first world problems
Yeah, it's first
that you
world.
were
Yeah.
talking about.
You think of all the things you've been through, and that's the
Yeah.
biggest issue at that point.
And um all of that combined, and then what happened at the very end, I went through a serious case of depression, which was eventually after 2020 till last year, which was monitored every month. I had to keep a little diary of my mood. Finally got my bipolar diagnosis as well, which was specifically triggered from COVID and what happened with my trauma in 2020. Um, and I also, from my trauma, developed Tourette's. So I don't really have verbal ones. I might make an ooh sound, but other than that, it's neck twitches. But it was all brought on from 2020 and everything that happened.
Yeah. I mean, but that's that's not surprising in the slightest.
No,
And again, I just said with varying degrees of Hirschsprungs, there's such a scale
there really
of
is.
and it's everything else that goes with it as well, isn't it? And PTSD, I know it's a very overused phrase, but it's something that really, really exists, especially with everything that you've been through.
Yeah,
And it's not a surprise in the slightest that that's happened.
no. My PTSD was, even though I'd done the EMDR, it went on for years. I haven't gotten over it, of course, but it's it's still it's still there, but it's not as severe as what it was. Since that night, um, I can't sleep in the dark. I have to have a light on because I'm in fear that if I wake up in the middle of the night and I pull back the bed sheets, that I'm going to be covered in blood again. So I still have to, which is so embarrassing as an adult now, but at the same time, for my own peace of mind, I have to do that. Because otherwise, if I wake up in the night, I will have a full-blown panic attack. And for ages, I couldn't sleep without someone in my room. So whether that was my mum or when it got to like a year down the line, I my mum couldn't stay in my room for years. So I ended up bringing my pets into my room so that no one was there, but I didn't feel alone. So I had my little guinea pigs running around on the floor during the night. Now thankfully I've got my partner and I've got my cats, but and that makes me feel so much more secure, but it really did bring out the worst in everything. PTSD is so overused by people who haven't had trauma, just using it as a funny term, when in reality it's so serious and it's so overlooked. And people don't understand the extremities of it and the effects. So that's another reason why I wanted to bring it up because I don't think that I'm the only person with Hirschsprung's disease that's had a traumatic event happen. And it's not okay that it happened, but it's okay not to feel okay about it. And trauma from health conditions is very likely and very normal to happen, unfortunately. But it's being able to recognize that and support yourself with it, which is,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think on that subject as well, I think there's a lot of people who have maybe been through not the same as you or not quite to that extent, but have certainly been through, because surgery is traumatic, and we as Hirschsprung's people go through a fair bit, but you may not necessarily realize that you've been through it. I think that's one of the big things as well.
yeah, I've not only got trauma from obviously what happened in 2020, but I've got a lot of trauma to do with hospitals and surgeries because of everything that I went through as a child, being pinned to the bed to do irrigation or being forced to take my meds where someone would hold my head and make me swallow it and stuff like that. But the surgeries as well, like in my 19 years, almost 20 years of living, I have had 24 surgeries in my lifetime. And the sad thing is that that's not even abnormal for people with Hirschsprungs or stoma bags. Maybe not to the extremity of that many times, but every person with Hirschsprungs has at least had a few. And it just, you don't understand how traumatic it can be to go through a surgery multiple times. Um, and I think the worst part is that in my head, the way that I think of it is that I've gone through all of this, and yet at the end of the day, there is no cure for Hirschsprung's disease. It's just uh, preventing things from happening or working with what you've already got. There is no end of the cycle. And I find it so disappointing that small or less known conditions don't get as much recognition for cures or preventatives as bigger things do. Um, I know that Hirschsprung's is a small minority of the world population, but it affects a lot of people still.
Absolutely. It's not as small as we think. I don't think it's not as small as we think. But thank you so much for coming on. This has been such an eye opener to chat to you. And just very quickly before we wrap up, future wise for you, future plans. What are you sort of hoping for the future?
I'm not too sure. I just want to live my life as normally as I can. I'm going to keep my stoma bag with me. I always joke that my partner's gonna have to change it when I'm like 70 because it's not going anywhere because it changed my life. But other than that, I'm just going to live my life like a normal person with a normal job, normal friends, and the only thing that's different about me is that I have a stoma bag and I have to have a surgery every 2 years. Other than that, I am still a person.
Fantastic. Great way to end. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
And
for
I
having
know it goes without saying, but I will anyway, that I wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you very much.